Welcome back to France 24. I'm Delon D'Souza and we are live from Paris. The headlines this hour. Anger continues to mount on the streets of Armenia after a ceasefire was clinched with Azerbaijan. It brought an end to 6 weeks of fighting but came with territorial losses in Nagorno-Karabakh. At least 3 people wounded after an IED targets a World War I commemoration attended by Western diplomats in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong threatened to resign after 4 of their legislators were disqualified. If the lawmakers quit, it would increase tensions over the democratic future of Hong Kong. Protests continue in Armenia this 2 days after a truce was reached to bring an end to the fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh. Demonstrators are calling for the pact with Azerbaijan to be invalidated. Baku made territorial gains during the 6 weeks of fighting. This Wednesday, Turkey signed an agreement with Russia to monitor the ceasefire in place.
Fury and sadness in Yerevan. At least 100 people demonstrated against the peace deal with Azerbaijan, fated in Baku as a triumph, but widely seen in Armenia as a defeat. The crowd chanted Nikol the traitor in a jab at Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, who agreed to the deal, while a member of the opposing Prosperous Armenia party rallied the crowd, despite a ban on public gatherings under martial law. Several protesters were arrested. The deal means that Azerbaijan will keep all the areas it seized in the past 6 weeks of fighting, including Shushi, a strategically important town not far from the region's capital, Stepanakert, and on the main artery linking the contested territory to Armenia. Armenia will also have to withdraw from surrounding areas. But without such a capitulation, some believe Armenia's losses could have been far worse.
Մարտական գործողությունները օրերի ընթացքում մենք պիտի կորցնեինք ամբողջ Արցախը։ Ունենայինք շատ ավելի զոհեր։
The peace deal comes after multiple failed ceasefires and at least 1,000 people killed.
For more on this story, we can bring in Artyom Tonoyan, an Armenian analyst and a research associate at the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at the University of Minnesota. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, an opposition deadline for the Prime Minister to resign in Armenia has come and gone. What will happen now on the streets? How will Armenians react to the fact that this is the new reality?
The situation is complex, the situation is fluid, and honestly, it is anyone's guess as to where this goes. The opposition is probably using this occasion to ask the Prime Minister to resign. There is genuine grief in the streets of Yerevan and throughout the Armenian cities, and the opposition thinks that now that the war has been fought and lost, they have their best chance to see Nikol Pashinyan's government go away.
Did the Prime Minister have, literally no choice because he literally had his back to the wall that he had to capitulate, given that Armenia suffered territorial losses?
Yes, the Prime Minister is in a very bad position coming out of the war. Armenia, for all intents and purposes, and the forces in Nagorno-Karabakh lost the war, and peace of sorts was imposed, not on Armenia's terms, but on the terms that was negotiated by Russia and Azerbaijan. So Armenia's Prime Minister's options, for all intents and purposes, have narrowed, and we will have to wait and see within the next couple of days how the situation will develop further, because it is dynamic, it is fluid, and quite honestly unpredictable.
You still think that the situation is volatile even with this ceasefire?
In terms of the conflict, yes, because what is happening is that some parliamentary members and a fraction of opposition parties are calling on the government to get rid of this document that they have signed. And if should the Armenian government get rid of it, I can guarantee you that neither Russia nor Azerbaijan will be happy about it, and Azerbaijan will use it as a pretext to make further war in the hopes of gaining more territory, which could be a total disaster for the Armenian government.
Okay, you mentioned two of the actors involved in this whole, conflict. Of course, you have the Russians and you have Azerbaijan, but you also have Turkey. And today, the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan sort of suggested that Turkey would be sending peacekeepers to Nagorno-Karabakh, but then security officials said they would just be observers. How are Armenians likely to react about this news?
Oh, it's not going to be perceived very well, neither by the Armenian government, who is a signatory to this paper, and neither by the Armenian population in Armenia, in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, or in the diaspora, because it would be the worst nightmare for the Armenian government to see a Turkish military controlling or patrolling territories that is considered Armenian or Nagorno-Karabakh. So this is not going to go down well, and it is anyone's guess what will happen. But having said that, neither the provisions signed by the Pashinyan or Aliyev or Putin is there a word about the Turkish military presence. We're speaking about a military monitoring capability rather than boots on the ground type of situation.
Now, we know who had Azerbaijan's back during the 6 weeks of conflict. Did the international community do enough to protect Armenia? Or was it just lip service?
Oh, it was not even a lip service. There was no, there were only occasional sort of patting on the back of Armenia, a gesture of moral support, if you will. Other than that, there was nothing that was done that didn't make the situation even worse. The international community, for all intents and purposes, did not manage the conflict well in this iteration of the conflict. Neither did they get directly involved in trying to stop it. So it was up to Russia, really, to do something about it, and they did. And of course, you will have people that are not happy about it, neither in Armenia nor in Azerbaijan. Nobody wanted, in the best case scenario, Russian boots on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh, but it is now a fait accompli. So it is what it is. Those are the facts now. And Armenians, Azerbaijanis, and the broader regional players have to deal with this fact from today.
Artyom Tunoyan, thank you very much for joining us on the program today. In other news, France has condemned an attack at a World War I remembrance in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. At least 3 people were wounded after an improvised explosive device targeted a ceremony attended by French, American, British, Italian, and Greek officials. A guard at the French consulate in Jeddah was wounded in an attack last month. The same day, 3 people were killed at a church in Nice.
The attack occurred during a World War I remembrance ceremony at this non-Muslim cemetery in the Saudi city of Jeddah. It was immediately condemned by the embassies of the 5 countries in attendance.
Such attacks on innocent people are shameful and entirely without justification.
Several people are reported to have been injured. The British government said 1 UK national had suffered minor injuries, while Greece's foreign ministry said a Greek policeman working at the Greek consulate in Jeddah had been wounded. The attacker was arrested, and Saudi authorities say that an investigation is underway. The French consulate in Jeddah urged its nationals in Saudi Arabia to exercise maximum vigilance. Wednesday's attack comes 2 weeks after a stabbing that lightly wounded a guard at the French consulate in Jeddah. The assault was carried out by a Saudi man who was arrested, but whose motives remain unclear. Both incidents come amid heightened tensions between France and the Muslim world, following the republication of caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad by satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo.
Earlier, I spoke to our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, and I began by asking him, why Jeddah?
Yeah, okay, 2 attacks in less than a month, but before that, there had been nothing in Jeddah for a very long time. The fact that France was involved in both incidents is perhaps significant. It was the French consulate that was attacked on October the 29th when a guard was stabbed by an attacker. He's okay. And in this case, it was the French consular authorities who organized the Remembrance Day meeting at the non-Muslim cemetery. But as you pointed out in your introduction, it wasn't just French diplomats there. There were Italians, Greeks, British and American diplomats as well. And the ones who were hurt in the attack weren't French. So, I'm not sure how much significance we should attach to that, except also to say that there is a tradition of Islamic radicalism in Saudi Arabia. The authorities have clamped down very hard on it in recent years. It used to be much more aggressive and widespread than it is today. But the fact of the matter, it is still active. And perhaps this is what we're seeing in this instance. But it's not clear by any means. Nobody has claimed authority. It could be the Islamic State. It could be Al-Qaeda. Perhaps it was just one individual acting by himself.
So, given that this attack did not happen anywhere near a consulate, who is the target exactly?
Well, I mean, this is a good question. Was it France because of everything that's been happening recently? Or was it more generalized than that? Was it an attack on the West in general, given the fact that there were so many diplomatic delegations at this Remembrance Day celebration? One suspects perhaps that France was being targeted because of the context. Remember, October the 16th, French schoolteacher Samuel Paty murdered, decapitated, because he during a lesson he was teaching about freedom of expression. He used by way of illustration, as you mentioned again in your introduction in that package, he used by way of illustration cartoons from Charlie Hebdo, the French satirical magazine, showing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. Perhaps it's that, and perhaps too French President Emmanuel Macron's strong reaction to that murder, in which he said that France would not back down. It will continue to defend its secular state, its secular values, including the right to expression and the right to blaspheme. Charlie Hebdo does use blasphemy occasionally, but one has to stress not just against Islam. Its attacks against Christianity, in particular the Catholic Church, are much more frequent and much more strong than against Islam. So, perhaps it's because of that, but we can't be sure at this stage.
Because, Rob, you picked up on this point. In the aftermath of Samuel Paty's murder, beheading, we had the French President Emmanuel Macron, who came out as a staunch defender for free speech. When he delivered Samuel Paty's eulogy, he said France will continue to publish these cartoons. Are we seeing all these small attacks, here and there in Nice, come in the aftermath of that statement?
I think perhaps there is a link, but I don't think we should necessarily read too much into it. We have seen demonstrations across the Middle East. We've seen a strong reaction across the Middle East, lots of criticism of France and President Macron for his statement, and also for a speech he gave before the murder of Samuel Paty, in which he described Islam as being a religion in crisis. That didn't go down very well either. It prompted President Erdogan of Turkey to question the mental health of President Macron. But, and also, of course, there's been a boycott of French goods in many countries across the Middle East. But these haven't been big demonstrations. It's not been a particularly effective boycott. And there's no real sense that this is turning into a widespread anti-French movement, at least at this stage. So, my feeling is that I don't think this amounts to anything much more than a fairly limited protest against France. It's unfortunate, of course, that these attacks happened in Saudi Arabia, but I don't think that Saudi Arabia has suddenly become the hotbed of Islamic resistance to the direction that France is moving in defense of its secular values.
Rob Parsons speaking to me there earlier. Now, France has honored writer Maurice Genevoix at the Pantheon today. During World War I, he depicted the horror of the trenches in memoirs that he published during the conflict. His remains were transferred to the Pantheon, which is where some of France's greatest men and women are buried. Now, a breakthrough has been reached on Libya's political future over in Tunisia, participants agreeing to a roadmap for elections within the next 18 months. Libya has been a country in chaos since the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi back in 2011.
We are under no illusions, and we know that a lot of work remains to be done. The Libyan Political Dialogue Forum has many more issues in front of it, such as designing a new governance structure to take the country as quickly as possible to elections. I have also heard the strong condemnation of the terrible conditions and the suffering of those who are arbitrarily detained and the demand for their immediate and unconditional release.
In other news, pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong said they would all resign. This after 4 legislators were disqualified. If the lawmakers quit, it would increase tensions over the future of Hong Kong. In recent years, the semi-autonomous region has seen its freedoms chipped away from mainland China. Karis Galland reports.
A show of solidarity from Hong Kong's pro-democracy lawmakers, 15 of them vowing to resign in protest after 4 of their colleagues were stripped of their seats.
In order to fight against the central government, the authoritative government, we stand for the people of Hong Kong. Today, we will resign from our positions because our partners, our colleagues are being disqualified by the central government's ruthless move.
Alvin Young, Kwok Ka-ki, Dennis Kwok and Kenneth Leung were disqualified on Wednesday, moments after one of China's top lawmaking bodies passed a resolution that allowed Hong Kong to remove legislators without going through the courts. Reasons to disqualify include supporting Hong Kong independence, refusing to acknowledge China's sovereignty, asking foreign forces to interfere in the city's affairs, or threatening national security. Hong Kong's pro-Beijing leader said the city needed a legislature of patriots.
我必須強調，有關全國人大常委會嘅決定係合憲、合法、合理嘅安排，係必要嘅，亦都係完全符合基本法嘅相關規定。
The oustings are the latest blow to the city's pro-democracy movement, which has been under increasing threat since China passed a sweeping national security law in late June. Since then, authorities have raided the newsroom of an anti-government tabloid, removed some pro-democracy books from libraries, and arrested dozens of activists.
In other news, the rise in coronavirus infections in Europe has put a strain on healthcare infrastructure. Over in Italy, lines of ambulances park outside hospitals awaiting beds. One hospital in the city of Naples is running so low on beds that it's resorted to treating patients in their cars.
Recording over 30,000 new infections a day, Italy is in the midst of a deadly second wave of coronavirus. As the death rate also climbs, hospitals are becoming inundated. At this hospital in Naples, beds are so scarce that patients are now being triaged in their own cars. Oxygen is given to those complaining of breathing difficulties as doctors try to ascertain an order for them to enter the hospital.
Un'assistenza iniziale, un pre-triage dove rileviamo I parametri vitali e i pazienti che desaturano forniamo ossigeno e un'assistenza primaria per evitare l'aggravamento della situazione.
The ambulances just keep coming. In Italy, people are waiting at least 5 days to get the results of their COVID tests. The increase in cases is worrying authorities, who say that the health system is in danger of becoming overwhelmed.
Con questi numeri, se non si raffredda la curva dei contagi, nessun sistema sanitario, tantomeno quello italiano, sarebbe capace di reggere.
Temporary hospitals are being built, but there are grave shortages of beds, equipment, staff, and even oxygen. A curfew is in place between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. across the entire country, but with cases continuing to climb, some are calling for stricter measures to be put in place.
Now, Pope Francis has pledged to rid the Catholic Church of sexual abuse. This a day after the Vatican released a report detailing the decades-long church cover-up of former U.S. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick's sexual misconduct. The 90-year-old was defrocked by the pontiff last year. Pope Francis authorized the study to determine how McCarrick rose through church ranks when his misconduct was an open secret. Catherine Viette reports.
As the Catholic Church once again deals with the fallout from sexual misconduct claims, Pope Francis makes a solemn vow to end clerical sexual abuse.
È stato pubblicato il rapporto sul doloroso caso dell'ex cardinale Theodore McCarrick. Rinnovo la mia vicinanza alle vittime di ogni abuso e l'impegno della Chiesa per sradicare questo male.
The Pope's remarks come on the heels of a damning 450-page report into ex-U.S. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. He was defrocked in 2019 after being found guilty of abusing a teenager in the 1970s, with evidence also pointing to years of sexual misconduct. The report accused the Vatican of mishandling the abuse claims against McCarrick.
Well, the McCarrick report is remarkable because it points to failings by a succession of popes, particularly John Paul II and Benedict XVI, who allowed McCarrick, along with Vatican officials, to rise through the ranks of the Church in the United States, despite the fact that there were consistent rumors that he had practiced sexual misconduct with adult seminarians.
Victims' rights groups say the McCarrick report stopped short of any meaningful change.
Apologies don't mean anything if they come with a list of excuses while it was okay. We need the church to punish those involved, and we need the church to make changes. They can't investigate themselves. Any reported abuse, whether it is an adult or a child, should immediately be reported to secular authorities.
Critics say that in order to stamp out clerical abuse, church culture that protects the accused over the accuser must change.